everyone. So good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone, depending on where you're joining us from. I believe we have people joining us from different parts of the world. And so we acknowledge all of you for making the time to join us this Saturday. This is a webinar hosted by the Africa-China Center for Policy and Advisory, the ACCPA. In a bit, I'll tell you more about who we are and what we do. But most importantly, we welcome you to today's webinar. So we are hoping to engage you on a very important issue that we're going to discuss today. And hopefully, all of you will be part of the conversation, right? So that we can have a very fruitful discussion. In and out, we should be done within the next 1 hour at most. And the session is in 2 parts. So we're going to have our speaker who is going to present on the topic at hand, today's discussion. So she's going to present on it. And after that, then the second session is when you come in, where you get a chance to ask your questions, right? So I'll read these questions out to the speaker, and then she will address it. If at any point, any of you wishes to speak, of course, I will give you the permission. You just have to raise your hand, and then I will give you the speaking permission, so you can speak. And whether you want to ask a question by speaking, or you want to give comment or contribution on the discussion that we are having. But for the Q&A, I'll advise that you use the Q&A button. So those of you who are familiar with the Zoom platform, there's a Q&A button. We have a chat button. We have a Q&A button. But I would like to use the Q&A. So if you have any question regarding the conversation that we're going to have today, you will use the Q&A button. That's where you're going to put your question. Of course, I'll read it out to the speaker. So the first part, our speaker will speak, and of course, the second part, you will come in with your questions, and then we can have a discussion. We really, really love to hear from you. We want our webinars to be very interactive. So we hope that you prepare some questions regarding the conversation. If you don't have any questions yet, it's okay. While the speaker is presented, I'm sure you'll be able to follow the discussion and be able to come up with some questions that will make the conversation very interactive. My name is Paul Frimpong. I'll be the moderator for today's webinar. I'm the Executive Director for the Africa-China Center for Policy and Advisory, right? So I think I'll just kickstart because it's already 10:04, 4 minutes past the hour. So we will kickstart the conversation. So this webinar, it's on digital skills Silk Road, which is trying to look at how this can be a pathway for win-win cooperation between Africa and China. I believe that our speaker will give us more details on what a digital skills Silk Road is, because it forms part of China's ambitious Belt and Road Initiative. Again, I'm sure our speaker will give more details about the Belt and Road Initiative. So the Digital Silk Road is a section of the Belt and Road Initiative, which is run by China. So in 2015 was when the Digital Silk Road was announced by Chinese President Xi Jinping, as the digital arm or technological arm of the Belt and Road Initiative. And we at the Africa-China Center for Policy and Advisory, so we are a policy research and think tank and advisory firm. Our aim is to bring an African perspective when it comes to our cooperation or relation with China. So we are first focused on Africa and China relations, right? So we are producing insights, reports, and researches, bringing more broader perspective of Africa's understanding of the kind of partnership or cooperation or relation that we have with China. So our interest, of course, is Africa's interest. We want to see how African countries and African economies can really, really benefit well from the kind of cooperation and relation that we have with China. It's an ever-ending relation that we have with China. Of course, China becoming Africa's largest trading partner over a decade ago, and it's still Africa's largest trading partner by far. So in this context, it's very relevant and very crucial that we get an African perspective of what really the relationship is, what it means for us as Africans, and how we can best get the best out of this relation that we have with China for Africans, of course, because everybody is in the relationship for their interest, right? So China is trading with Africa, of course, with the core focus on Chinese citizens, how they can also grow the economy. Same way Africa is also relating with China on how we can also grow our economy and help the African people. So for us, we're very excited to be part of this journey to try and help shape policy, shape understanding, shape perspective on what it means and how we can benefit as Africans from the kind of relation we have with China. And that's what we've been doing since our establishment. We are headquartered here in Ghana because we have researchers, research fellows and researchers in other countries across the continent, and we are growing and we will keep growing. We'll welcome any form of partnership, any form of strategic partnership that you are seeking. If you are interested in what we are doing, please, as the presentation goes on, I'll put our website link. Since you registered to join, I'm sure everybody visited our website. You have our contact details there. You are free to reach us, discuss any form of collaboration that you think you might put on the table. We are very open to that, so that together we can build the Africa we want and ensure that there's a win-win cooperational relation between Africa and China. So we win as Africa, China also win as China, and that is the kind of aim and objective that we have as a think tank, right? So today, as part of our conversation, we do a lot of work, and one of the things that we do is to bring discussions on the table. We try to engage with experts from different parts of the world who bring perspective. And this, we do it under what we call Africa China 2.0, which is a webinar series that we do. We've done a couple of them in the last few months. So almost every month we post a webinar. So we've been doing that for 6 months now. So you can visit our YouTube channel as well. You'll get some of these recordings there. Just like today, we are recording this session. And of course, afterwards, we made it available on our YouTube channel. So you can visit our websites. We have these old discussion that we had, they are available on our website. You can follow them and understand more what's happening between Africa and China. So today, our topic is the digital Silk Road, the path to Africa-China win-win cooperation. And we're very excited, very privileged that we have an opportunity to have one of our very own, I mean, she is a senior research fellow of the Africa-China Center for Policy Advisory. She spent over a decade in China, where she completed her PhD in international trade economics at the University of International Business and Economics, UIBE, and she got other accolades in academic excellence. She's an economist, consultant, and associate professor at ISP Gombe in Kinshasa and DRC, which is Democratic Republic of Congo. Prior to her return to DRC, she was a research analyst for an African-led international consulting firm. She primarily assessed China-Africa strategic partnerships, highlighting the necessity for African countries to truly understand their development needs and effectively join forces to achieve sustainability. Her research findings appeared in international newspapers and magazines, including the Financial Times and The Economist. So really, we have someone who really understands the dynamics when it comes to Africa and, of course, China, after spending over a decade in China. She speaks fluent Mandarin Chinese, has been a consultant for Chinese state-owned company regarding investments in DRC telecommunication sector under the Belt and Road Initiative. So today we're very privileged, happy that we have Dr. Nancy Lohalo, who is a senior research fellow of the Africa China Center for Policy Advisory, to take us through today's discussion. After a presentation, then we'll get into the Q&A, so please get ready. So Nancy, please, you're welcome to take over and share your perspective with us. Thank you. Hello, Nancy, are you there?
Hello? Hello, can you hear me? Hello? Yes, my apologies. I lost the connection.
Fine, that's fine. We can hear you now. So you can turn on your video and then also you can start your presentation now.
All right. Okay, hello everyone.
Yes, hello to
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be able to discuss on a topic that is near to my heart. I will start. Can you see my screen?
Yes, I can see your screen.
Perfect. All right. So today's topic is the Digital Silk Road, a path to China, to Africa-China Win-Win Cooperation. So today we will look at this topic from 4 different perspectives. We will start with the background, which is the Belt and Road Initiative. Then we will dive into more of what the Digital Silk Road truly is. Then we will continue with towards a win-win cooperation, and we will finish with the recommendations. So let's start with the Belt and Road Initiative, the background of the Digital Silk Road. The Belt and Road Initiative was announced by the Chinese government in 2013 as the project of the century. The aim of the BRI was to promote greater connectivity on a transcontinental scale. So the Belt and Road Initiative started with 2 components. We had the land, which is called the Silk Road Economic Belt. That's actually a transcontinental passage that links China with South Asia, Russia, Europe, and so on by land. Then we had the second component, which is the maritime road, called the 21st Century Maritime Silk Road, which is connecting China's coastal regions with Southeast Asia, the South Pacific, Middle East, Europe, Africa, and so on. And if we look closer at the map that we have here, that's a map that is actually showing a more recent development of the BRI relationships today. So if we look at the color code, for instance, we can see China's trade position per country. And then we notice that China all over the world is a major trading partner for many countries. If we focus maybe on Africa, we can also see that it's either the first trading partner or the second trade partner. So there is already a solid ground there. And if we look at the route, we can see that we also have the BRI overland corridors that are describing more of the Silk Road economic belt. Then we have the maritime Silk Road as well that is going even to Latin America, for instance. And we also have different hubs that are portrayed on the map. We have port, railway, multidimensional, and so on. So the Belt and Road Initiative intends to create a shared future through a regional integration, through massive infrastructure development, railroad, highways, pipelines, shipping ports, and so on, and trade enhancement as well. Since when we develop infrastructure, it's easier to connect countries with each other, and it's easier to actually trade with each other. And at talking about this perspective, if we look at Africa's infrastructure, and I'm thinking more about the railways and how they were designed by colonialists at the time. They were designed to transport natural resources. They were never designed for African countries to trade with each other, for instance. so that we see that today the proportion of trades amongst African countries remains extremely low. However, if we develop railroads, etc., that are actually well designed or in the context of the Belt and Road Initiative, it could increase trades amongst African countries by 1,000%. And so now I will continue also with inclusive economic growth and connecting people. So in 2022, we have noticed, still in the Belt and Road Initiative, that the technology sector experienced a tremendous growth of engagement in BRI countries compared to the previous year. So if we dive more into the BRI numbers, as of January 2023, there were 150 countries that have joined the initiative. When China started, they had in mind maybe more of Asia, Europe, and so on. However, they stated early on that every country was welcome. So we also do have, since 2013, between 2013 and 2022, we had $962 billion of dollars of cumulative BRI engagement. In 2022, we had $67.8 billion of investment that were based on 200 deals. And still the same year, we had 19.16 billion of dollars that were dedicated to non-financial direct investment. And as I mentioned before, we had a tremendous growth in technology sector and also in the finance sector. So we had a 3,450% growth of engagement in the finance sector, and we had a 7,536% growth of engagement in the technology sector. So if we have a closer look maybe at the engagement in the Belt and Road Initiative between 2013 and 2022, and I will focus more on the technology aspect. I've mentioned that we had a tremendous growth in that respect in 2022. And this growth is actually also related to as we said, the strong technology manufacturing engagement. So we had a 7.6 billion investment in Gigafactory to actually produce batteries. And we had investment in many countries with that respect. We also had a potential engagement that can be expected in 5 project types. Looking at the Belt and Road Initiative and in the future, we had, in terms of manufacturing in new technologies, batteries, we have already started with this. With trade enabling infrastructure, continuing with pipelines, roads, and so on, and information and communications technologies. So we have data centers and everything that is related to it. We also have resource-backed deals, mining, oil, gas, and high visibility or strategic projects, such as railway. Now focusing more on Africa, we have seen that the Belt and Road Initiative truly has become a compass for Africa-China's cooperation and in Africa's fight to tackle the issue of inadequate infrastructure that is hindering severely Africa's development. And when the Belt and Road Initiative started, they focused more on East Africa. It was the early focus of the BRI. And this is where we have seen actually a tremendous result. So we have East Africa has developed into what we can say a central node in the maritime Silk Road. So connected by finished port, planned port, pipeline, railways, and so on, as well as power plants to build, and all funded by Chinese companies and lenders. Also, East Africa's exports could increase by $192 million annually. That was an estimate that was done by the United Nations Economic Commission. And if we look at it maybe from like a broader perspective, the Belt and Road Initiative is also increasingly seen as a catalyst for African regional economic integration and competitiveness. So here we have some examples of the Belt and Road Initiative in African countries. And as I said, we can see more of the results in the eastern part of Africa. So for instance, we have a standard gauge railway in Kenya connecting Mombasa to Nairobi. We have a naval base in Djibouti, and we also have an electric railway from Addis to Djibouti as well. So now in 2015, a third component, because we had the two components, we had the land route, we had the maritime route, and now we had a third component that was introduced by the Chinese government in an official white paper in the Belt and Road Initiative as the Digital Silk Road. So now we will dive more into what is the Digital Silk Road, because the Digital Silk Road, which aims to improve the digital connectivity in Belt and Road Initiative countries, is multidimensional, fast-changing, and often poorly understood. That's something that's remain all the time. It's that as technological progress, as the BRI initiative, the Digital Silk Road is fast-changing. Maybe the definition or the implications of the Digital Silk Road that we thought today might change maybe in a year's time. So it's always fast-changing, such as technology. And given its complexity, it's not necessarily clear. There are many actors, so sometimes it remains, often it poorly understood. So if we look maybe at different definitions from different authors, whether they are in academia or maybe a government and so on, we can see, for instance, that looking at the first, not necessarily definition, but implications of the Digital Silk Road, we read that the Chinese government articulated a need for a bilateral cross-border optical cable networks at a quicker pace, a planned transcontinental submarine optical cable project, and improve spatial information passageways to expand information exchanges and cooperation. And here we can see that one part of the BRI is the DSR, Digital Silk Road, presented as both a boon to the Chinese tech companies and a form of support for developing country partners. So here we can see more from it's presented more like an opportunity for China's private sector, for China's tech companies to leverage the Digital Silk Road and go abroad, expand their market, and for DSR countries now to receive that support. If we look at the Fedelstein definition, we say that it's an adjunct to the BRI focused on internet connectivity, artificial intelligence, the digital economy, telecommunications, smart city, and cloud computing. So you have a definition that is broader and taking, we'll say, more of the digital aspect per se. The next one, the Digital Silk Road, is a branch within the BRI that focuses on digital connectivity abroad to strengthen China's role as a technological superpower. So here we have a definition that emphasizes more of China's aim to expand its technological superpower, since in China, digitalization technology remains highly advanced. And finally, it is essentially the technology dimension of the BRI and encompasses all things technology related, from the development of the digital service sector, such as cross-border e-commerce, smart city, telemedicine, and internet finance, to accelerating technological progress, including computing, big data, Internet of Things, artificial intelligence, blockchain, and quantum computing. So here we have something that is a bit more technical. But if we look, actually, there was a book that came out, I think 1 year ago, 1 or 2 years ago, and it's a deep dive on the Digital Silk Road that describe, I would say that gives a great description of what the different applications are, what are the challenges, especially when it comes to defining the Digital Silk Road. So if we look at it maybe from a closer look, the different challenges that we encounter is that the Digital Silk Road, as I mentioned before, remains poorly understood, both as a government initiative or a commercial endeavor. We also have that the technological change is occurring at a rapid pace, very much like China's private sector technology industries. And the perception in a year time of what the Digital Silk Road comprises might differ from our understanding today. So it's very challenging to define the parameters of DSR. The little official documentation that exists is ambiguous and sometimes contradictory. So for instance, we will have documentations where we take into considerations maybe digital tools such as TikTok cannot be considered in the Digital Silk Road, but then we have other documents that also take into consideration because they will say that it's all collaboration in the digital sphere, so it's still ambiguous. So if you look more at the understanding and the implications, here in this book, they tell us that the BRI, it's the DSR, it's the cyber and technological element of the broader BRI, that the DSR concept has evolved into an umbrella term for various activities of interest to the China government in the cyber realm. And it's an effort to develop technological capabilities, mostly outside of China, with direct involvement of Chinese firms, Chinese advisors, the integration or expansion of market for Chinese goods and services. And with this Digital Silk Road, China aims to make progress in 5 key areas. We have to strengthen connectivity, and of course, whether it is the BRI, the DS
Hello, Nancy. I think we are missing you there. Okay. There's network connectivity. She had to leave. I think she'll rejoin. So kindly, if you have questions, please, you can start preparing your questions and send them through the Q&A. So while we wait for Nancy to join us to complete the presentation, you can start preparing your questions regarding the DSR that she's talking about, so that when she's done with her presentation, she'll delve deeper into those questions. So kindly use the Q&A button to ask your question. So basically, from what she has said, so China, introduced the broader vision of the Belt and Road Initiative in 2013, which is aimed at bridging or bringing connectivity in Asia, Europe, and Africa. Okay, she's back. So maybe.
Sorry, it's the connection here. It's a disaster today.
Yeah, it's fine. I think we have you back now. So please take over and proceed. Yeah.
Here. Okay, perfect.
Yes.
Okay, so as I was saying, where did I stop exactly? Did you get this part?
Oh, take this part again. Take this part. Yeah, we're here.
All right. Okay. So with the digital Silk Road, China aims to make tremendous progress in 5 key areas. First, we have to strengthen connectivity. And by strengthening connectivity across the countries, really, whether it is the BRI or the DSR, the people are what are at the center. So by strengthening connectivity, really what we are aiming to do here is to advance integration of people. The second key area is to accelerate digital transformation, so to advance application of digital technology, to build innovation chain, so to make progress in fostering innovation capacity, to strengthen policy alignment, to make progress really in the digital economy, and to enhance exchange and cooperation. So also, ultimately, to make progress in governance systems. So now let's look at towards a win-win cooperation aspect. So at the FOCAC Summit in 2018, Africa-China Corporation reached a strategic agreement to build a community of shared future, where they were committed to further develop the win-win relationship. The core principle of China-Africa Economic Cooperation is to achieve a win-win scenario through the promotion of mutual economic benefit. So it's not necessarily that one is greedy, the other is greedier. It's not necessarily, it's more greedy. It's both are looking, African countries, whether China, both are looking at their own interest, and also trying to find a common ground, because at the end of the day, it's about mutual economic benefits. It's about a shared future. So China-Africa community of shared future is characterized by joint responsibility, win-win cooperation, happiness for all, cultural prosperity, common security, and harmony between humanity and nature. So this is a parenthesis because FOCAC actually started more than 20 years ago. And when FOCAC started, it was mainly focused on enhancing trade between African countries and China. And over the years, as Africa-China relations evolved, and China pushing the narrative that Africa is a land of opportunity, that's also having a stronger partner, a stronger Africa. It's also beneficial for China to have a strong partner, as we said, mutual shared future, economic prosperity, being able to have this strong partner to actually collaborate on multiple projects. So if we look, for instance, at the Economist, we can see that the perception of Africa has evolved over the years. Maybe there are also factors that have to be taken into consideration, but really China pushed that narrative of Africa being a land of opportunity. So for instance, in 2000, we had the Economist with this edition, Africa, the hopeless continent. And as the years were going by, we can see that in 2011, we have Africa Rising. In 2013, we have Aspiring Africa, and so on. So that was a parenthesis. So now China's digital influence in Africa did not start with the digital Silk Road. It started way before, and I think that many of us are familiar with China in the telecommunication sector, because this is where the digital influence actually started decades ago, especially with private firms such as Huawei or ZTE. And the implementation of those Chinese firms in the telecommunications sector actually followed the continent's telecommunication revolution in the 90s. So as soon as the liberalization of telecommunication sector started, they saw an opportunity to actually expand their market and to contribute, help build, upgrade African countries' telecommunication industry, telecommunication infrastructure, and so on. So to the point that companies such as Huawei and ZTE, they have built a core telecommunication network infrastructure in many African countries. We are talking internet backbone network. We are talking about optical fiber in more recent developments and so on. And one aspect that was attractive also for African countries was that China telecoms would come with equipment that were competitive in prices, cost effective, and they also had access to the cost effective. So the equipment were low price, and they were also effective in nature. So that was a win for African countries in that sense. We also saw that mobile telephony is much more developed in Africa than the use of fixed broadband, and especially for internet access. So therefore, Africa has seen a rapid development in the telecommunication sector, and this trend is set to continue. So by the end of 2020, there were 495 million mobile subscribers in sub-Saharan Africa, so amounting to 46% of the region's population. And we are estimating that this number will rise to 650 million of subscribers by 2025. Now, today, the Chinese technology companies, they permit almost all layers of Africa's telecommunication technology, and drawing African countries further into China technological sphere of influence. So it's not something that is new or foreign to African countries. However, it's already familiar in the sense that Chinese technologies companies have been in the digital sphere for years. However, now it's about bringing more diversity into that aspects. So here we have a recent development of Chinese investments in the African telecommunication sector. We have different projects in different African countries, and we can see that whether, for instance, in Tanzania, we had the National ICT Broadband Backbone phase 2 that was financed by the Exim Bank, borrowed by the Tanzanian government, implemented by Huawei and CITCC. We had Yamant, Deere, and so on. So we can see that Huawei is dominating the market at this point. So now, why could the digital Silk Road, why could it become a powerful instrument for African countries? Why should they further consider it? And how can they further leverage it? So in recent years, an increasing number of African countries, they have considered digital technologies as a pivotal aspect in their development strategy. If we look at this map, which shows the digital agendas, policies, and plans of African countries in 2021, we can see that the vast majority of countries have taken some steps, whether they are big steps or smaller steps, to implement some sort of digital components in their whether it is in their development strategy, or if it's maybe to start with a small project. So if we look maybe closer at the legend, we have countries with digital plans or policies. We have countries with digital plans or policies that are outlined in their national development strategies, and so on. So looking closer at the different strategy, so for digital agendas, they are presented in digital strategic plans, meaning that those countries, they have policies and strategic plans covering very specific items such as e-commerce, cybersecurity, digital privacy, and e-government. We have digital agenda that as presented in the national development plans. We have national development plans this time that outline digital agendas. So it's still in the same plan. It's not, for instance, like a proper formal policy strategic plan as the digital strategic plan I mentioned. We have the digital agenda that are presented in disparate documents, policies, law, and initiatives. And we have very few African countries that do not have some form of digital policy or strategy in place. So now, if we want to have something that is more concrete, concrete example, so we do have the digital strategic plan, as I mentioned before, national development plans and disparate documents, policy laws, and initiatives. So for instance, in Egypt, they have a digital strategic plan, which is called Egypt's ICT 2030 strategy, which is in line with the national development plans and another plans, which is called Egypt Vision 2030. We do have Egypt National Artificial Intelligence Strategy. They have a plan to use AI technologies to achieve national sustainability development goals, so on. We also have a vision for the country to become a global AI player, and we have an e-commerce strategy as well. So if we move from another example from the national development plans, looking, for instance, at Gambia, the national development plans 2018 and 20, this was erased. So we have, their goal is to make the Gambia as a digital nation and creating a modern information society. And to do so, the plans outline upgrading ICT infrastructure, enhancing access to broadband, creation of national data centers, strengthening cybersecurity, and so on. And the last one, which are more the digital agenda as disparate document, policies, laws, and initiative. So for instance, in Ghana, we have Ghana Beyond Aid, which is a Ghana Vision document. And we have outlines to develop digital strategy as a part of this vision. Then we have national security, cybersecurity policy and strategy to ensure cybersecurity. We have the digital financial services policy, and then we have Ghana digital payments roadmap to create a robust digital economy, to ensure financial inclusion, and to promote the development of fintech. So for many African countries, if we look at the trends in Africa's digital agenda, digital infrastructure development remains a priority to further achieve their digital agenda. So today, of course, many African countries suffer from dislike of digital infrastructure, lack of access to internet that is affordable for everyone, that is stable enough, that is fast enough. So the first step, of course, would be to develop digital infrastructure, and many countries are aware that this must be a first step, and they know that they've put it as a priority. Second priority, we have the digital skills. Also, this is also an aspect where many people in African country lack of digital literacy, of digital skills, of digital awareness as well, and affordability of digital services and so on. So over 30 African countries, they have procured 3G network, and over 20 countries, they have built the fiber optic networks and e-government platform, for instance. So we have more examples of area of win-win cooperation. So we have key areas also based on the priority of digital agenda. We have digital infrastructure, digital skills, business to consumer, or business to business solutions, regulations on digital security, privacy and data protection, digital solutions for SMEs to access to finance. So Africa's win, so in digital infrastructure will be to actually by engaging in the DSR to be able to develop digital infrastructure, different cooperation with China that have the expertise to do so. And also for China, it's a win. They not only have the expertise to do so, they also are trying to tackle the domestic ICT manufacturing subsector overcapacity. And so they are enabled also to, like, private companies, they are also enabled to really sell their product on the market per se, because it's already saturated. So it's also a win from their perspective to be able to come to Africa and to be able to sell the product, and to also receive the support for the government as well. And we have the digital skills. As I mentioned before, there is a lack of digital literacy, digital skill, digital awareness in African countries. And it's an opportunity also to collaborate in that sense, given that China has also the expertise. And the Belt and Road Initiative, it's also about people to people. So it's also the opportunity to carry on with this vision. We have also business to consumer or business to business solutions. And here it will be more about the e-commerce development. Africa, many African countries now, they are engaging in e-commerce, even though the degree of engagement are not necessarily the same everywhere. Some are more developed than others. However, there is room for improvement. There is room for further development. And China, in that sense, has the expertise, and Alibaba, as we can see, has already plans to construct an electronic world trade platform that can also be a great support for African countries to be able to further to really integrate the international market. We have regulations on digital security, privacy, and data protection. So in this case, we are talking more about the cybersecurity development. It will also depend on Africa's vision in that sense. Usually in the BRI or DSR, it's not China who comes and impose the projects. Oftentimes, it's the African countries that they design the project, and they carry on with it. So China can become an advisor in that sense. But really, it's African countries who take the and so on. So recommendations. So here, what we have seen here is that the digital Silk Road is an opportunity for
Nancy,
yes.
We lost you, so you need to start from the recommendation. So you need to start again. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So as I said, the DSR, the Digital Silk Road, is an opportunity for China and for Africa to I won't say to revamp the relationship, but we've seen that with the BRI initiative, there has been a slowdown in terms of investment. And the DSR is an opportunity now for African countries and for China to revamp their relationship and to diversify their area of cooperation. The DSR is an opportunity this time for Africa to further push their digital agendas. And it's for China also an opportunity to export its expertise, over capacity, and so on. However, looking at it from an African perspective, I think that whether it is the government or the private sector, I would say more, they are unaware of this opportunity. And we have seen, like when we dig more into the DSR, that the private sector are the ones that are more engaged in the different activities. So the government, and I'm still looking at it from an African perspective, I would say that in order to further leverage, to further push on the DSR, they should jointly with China start by developing programs, because, okay, we have this aspect of infrastructure development, which will engage more government, Chinese private sector, governments. But we also have this aspect of the people which are central to the Belt and Road Initiative. They remain central to the DSR. So it's very important, if we want also to promote this inclusive growth, to make sure that people have the skills, that they are aware that there are opportunities. So we have to make sure that we develop programs that would help build these different capacities, programs that will help transform SMEs, for instance, in Africa, that are still engaged in more obsolete practices, not necessarily being aware that there are digital opportunities. So pushing these agendas. So I really think that this should be the ground to start with. And this is also a topic that should be that already central in the BRI, but I feel that it should be pushed even more because we are not all aware of this. So I am done. Thank you very much for your attention.
Insightful. I think you took us a very systematic journey in terms of giving us, you may stop sharing your screen now so that I can. Okay, so you give us, a very strategic, well-segmented journey, giving us background to the, of course, the BRI, and then of course the DSR, which is, more like an offspring from the BRI, which is very insightful. And of course, as you mentioned before, the Digital Silk Road, there have already been technological, exchanges and development, especially the telecommunications sector of many countries across the continent. We have the ZTE and the Huawei and all of them. Of course, you also mentioned about Africa's own agenda, digital agenda and plans and national policies and programs prioritizing the digital economy. And so how that even fits more into the DSR, and how we can create this win-win company. I think it's been very insightful. We have questions that have come in. I'll read them to you, but before that, I just want to start with the question, right? So we go, if you follow, I'm just going to play a bit of just try to read from certain perspectives. So we've seen, and of course, we've seen a bit of questions being raised about security, especially from Western countries. As we've seen in recent past, some Chinese technologies and some Chinese companies have been banned because of security concerns raised by especially countries in the West. In Africa, nothing like that, but in the West, there are concerns about Chinese technology and security. And so just opposing that concern in terms of the security concern raised by in the West, and now that Africa is also now trying to develop our digital economy and leverage on the DSR. My question is, should we be concerned as the Western countries are, as a continent, should we be concerned about the issue about security when it comes to the digital partnership and the deals that we're getting with China in terms of the DSR? So that's my question.
Thank you for your question. That actually is an issue that has been raised over and over, and especially when we look at the digital Silk Road, that's something that is coming back all the time, especially from a Western perspective, because from an African perspective, we are looking at it more as an opportunity. To develop our infrastructure, to develop our skills, to raise awareness, and to really catch on the train of digital transformation, digital development. From my knowledge, those are the concerns that have been raised, but do we have actually proof of the security, that security has been violated? That's also something that we should make sure that we actually have proof, or that security has been violated, or like there is a real trade somewhere. Because when I look at it more from this China-Africa-China's relations, it's more about China wanting also to have a strong partner in Africa, to help build a stronger partner. It's more beneficial for China to have a stronger partner than Africa, that maybe that today we still have a strong partnership. For instance, when I look at trade, etc. However, maybe the composition of trade is different. It's not necessarily effective as it should be, but really the concern is to have a strong partner with in Africa. So everything that is come to cyber security violation, we do not have any proof of that. I don't see why it should, why it could become a reality. Also something that was raised, because when we're talking about security, I'm also thinking about everything that is maybe more of like on the restrictive side of the internet, that China never imposes countries, or they don't interfere in national affairs. So for them to also trying to, whether it is to impose their model or to violate security, personally, I don't think it's a reality, or nor that it will become a reality.
Okay, great. I get a point. So, of course, if you track China's non-interference policy, what they do at home, they don't impose it on any country. Of course, I think that is where the narrative also comes from. Social countries, that we're looking at how China have control on how technology is used at home. You know, there are restrictions in China when it comes to asset technology, and that is for their people, and that's what they do. So then, assuming that that is how you're going to also track and you know, impose such, you know, which is not their program anyway. They don't do that. They don't interfere. So I think that is a fair point. And I totally agree with you that once there's no evidence, there's evidence in China itself, but not evidence of China doing this in other countries, because they don't do that. That's fine. So there's a question from Hagan. I'm going to read from the Q&A. Please, you're welcome to send in your questions to the Q&A chat, and I'll read them out. So Hagan is asking, are Chinese private enterprise actively involved in the DSR initiative, or solely at the government level? So are we seeing Chinese private enterprises, you know, in the DSR, or now we just only government to government level that we are seeing? Yeah.
When it comes to the DSR, we have seen that the private sector, actually Chinese private sector companies are more involved into the DSR. But when you look at it also from an African perspective, we can see that we have telecommunications, the telecommunication sector that is more, that has received more of the DSR, would say investment or DSR component. We can see that we have telecommunication companies such as Huawei, ZTE, and so on. But yes, indeed, it's they are more involved than the government.
She's asking 3 questions, right? So the first question is, so thank you for the presentation. We all enjoy your presentation. So first of all, he's asking about what is the biggest challenge BRI faces in Africa. And then example was given that, you know, some scholars believe that Chinese government has brought a heavy debt burden to Africa. Of course, you cannot discuss BRI without talking about the debts, you know, that accompanies. But I have a question here that borders on debt and environment and impact of the DSR, which of course, if this question answers it, then that's fine. So talking about debt, right? So he's saying that some scholars, you know, believe that the Chinese government has brought a BRI to burden African countries in terms of debts, or even to outcompete, you know, countries like the US and Europe in Africa. So it's asking, what do you think? Is that the case? Is that why BRI is in to overburden us to outcompete other countries who are trading with Africa? What do you think here?
Okay, thank you very much for the question. Well, that is true that when it comes to BRI, there is this aspect of debt that comes up a lot because it's the core of the BRI initiative is to actually build this massive infrastructure to connect countries with each other under the form of a loan. So, for instance, if I take Kenya, the Gulf Railway in Kenya, for instance. So, of course, before carrying on with the project, there were discussions, there were contracts, there were different requirements that have been discussed prior to carry on with the activity. But when we do have now that we have the finished product, the goal is actually to be able to repay China, of course, because it's a debt, with the exploitation of the infrastructure that have been put into place. It's not like we are building, they are building it and then you have to pay right away. There is also a time frame to pay for that. And it's sometimes also we have for instance, World Bank that also have done those type of projects as well. So it's something that it's normal, but the government itself that maybe should also look at, is it worth it to do this specific project, or maybe we should put maybe a focus on this specific project that will be more rentable, like we'll have a higher rentability and we will be able to pay on time and then reinvest. And so it's really for our governments to also make sure that the project that we are asking China to within the BRI initiative, that they are worth doing in terms of financial burden and so on. So since also that the BRI projects are not imposed by China, China doesn't come to African countries and say, okay, we are going to have to build a railway, and so it's the African countries who are designing those projects. So I hope this.
Under the BRI, you submit your project and you have to make sure that you've done the feasibility, the commercial viability of that project, because the project has to pay themselves out to China. So you take on the loan to do the project, but then you have to make sure the project is a project that is commercially viable, that you're able to generate, they give us a time frame that is ideally enough for such a project to pay back. So if it's commercially viable and you manage it well, definitely you should be able to pay back the debt, and which makes sense, of course. I mean, it's always going to be about raising debt to do this kind of BRI projects. I think I'll ask the second question from Jean about digital technology. I'm just asking the last question from Jean. So, finally, given the complexity of digital technologies, will African countries and citizens have concerns about their privacy and national? I think you touched on that based on my first question. It's asking about privacy and national data security in this collaboration. So I don't know, you want to say something or
Yes, I think I've mentioned briefly about data protection, privacy, and so on. As African countries now, they are developing their digital agendas, incorporating them in some official documents or in their national development strategy, that they have to
I think we lost Nancy there. Nancy? Okay, so we've got a couple more questions here.
Hello.
You're still not back fully. Maybe position yourself well. Okay, so if you lost her, so she'll rejoin. Okay. So please, you can still keep sending your questions. If we are unable to answer all of them in this session, we'll get an answer to write them back to you. Yes, so we have you back.
Yes, I'm here.
Yes. You were running up on the data, privacy and protection bit, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I said that I mentioned it earlier, that it's also an area for countries, African countries and China maybe to collaborate, because of course African countries, they have mentioned it, some of them in their national development strategies, digital agendas, and so on, because it's I would say that it's complementary with digital transformation. So for now, I would say that each country, they have to define and also be looking at maybe the international standards of what data protection and privacy means on an international level, and maybe also looking at it from a national perspective as well, if necessary. Finding also ways to collaborate with China, or maybe ask China for advice. It's also a possibility in that sense.
Okay, sure. Thank you very much. So this is from an anonymous participant. So asking that the line between government-run business and private operators in China is very slim. Can we be confident to claim that DSR operators are private in the true sense of the term? So I don't know whether you got a question. So so the question is about.
I didn't get the question.
Okay.
I didn't hear.
Is it better now? Can you hear me?
Yes, now it's better. I can hear.
Okay. So the question is that the line between government-run businesses and private businesses in China is very slim, right? So in China, it's very difficult to really, dissociate, between private company and public-run company. That's what the question. So can we then be confident to claim that DSR operators are private in the true sense of the term? So if some of the operators, we identify that these operators are private operators in the DSR space, from Chinese company, private company, can we be confident that they are truly private, or there's still going to be governments involved in that? That's the question.
All right, thank you for the question. First of all, you said that it's difficult to separate. There is like a thin line between Chinese private companies and Chinese public companies, right?
Correct.
From my experience, it was relatively clear that there were it was relatively clear private companies, Chinese state-owned companies. But maybe for some cases, and I'm looking at Huawei, who has now in the digital Silk Road, for instance, that is a major player that, of course, they will now maybe have more ties with the government. And especially when we enter in the digital Silk Road, we are supported by the government. The companies that are entering the digital Silk Road in China, they are supported by the government. So the digital Silk Road, as I've mentioned earlier, is complex, and it's difficult to define. There are many players in the digital Silk Road, whether it is the private sector, the public sector. We have many areas of expertise as well. We have many areas that are being a part of it. So it's also difficult to give maybe like a precise answer. I think this is even what the book was trying to do, is trying to really answer those questions, but it remains highly complex. So I hope this answer somehow your question.
Sure. All right, so this one sounds a bit funny, but it's still a question anyway. So it's asking, so how ironic your network, Nancy's network, is behaving. Like your network is unstable, right? So it's asking that we need a stable connectivity. Is
Yes.
China the answer? Do we need China to be able to get a stable connectivity so that you can stay with us all this while without this interruption? So that's just by the way, I think. Yeah, so this question is from Michael, asking, I say great and insightful presentation. The question is, are there particular reasons for the dominance of Huawei and ZTE in this whole China digital Silk Road and African governments? Because as you can see, ZTE and Huawei have been very dominant in terms of the digital, agenda. In fact, Huawei even in Ghana, they work on cyber, cyber, security related issues and all of that. So they're very strong and they're doing so much with the country. So it's asking, is there a particular reason for this dominance in this context?
Okay, thank you for the question. China's digital influence in Africa started already in the 90s. I presented it. So it started in the 90s, where we did have the liberalization of the telecommunication industry in many African countries. Companies such as Huawei or ZTE were one of the first, if not the first, to come to China. They had the African countries to further develop infrastructure, further develop the telecommunication industry. They had the technology, they had lower prices, so it was more attractive for them. Of course, there were other companies coming from Western countries. We had also Ericsson and so on. However, China was able to really implement itself, digitally speaking, in the telecommunication sector. So now when we were carrying on with the Belt and Road Initiative and the Digital Silk Road Initiative, they were already there. They were well implemented, so it was easier to go through them. But there are other opportunities, because those companies, they focus a lot on whether it is to introduce, for instance, the new the 5G, or to upgrade digital infrastructure, and so on. But there are many other opportunities in the digital sphere for maybe smaller Chinese private companies to come to Africa's digital sphere, and trying to find ways also to further this path of women cooperation.
Okay, sure. Thank you very much for that. So I think this will be last but one question. So this is from Michael. So we always hear that the BRI is China's answer for African development. Really? However, what is the latest study on real-time quantifiable benefit to African economy, especially in Sub-Saharan Africa? So the BRI, not necessarily the DSM, BRI, it's been, according to Michael, it's been paraded as China's answer for African development. But are there any tangible results seen in Africa from the BRI?
Mm-hmm. So that's a great question. That's a question that might take a long time to answer, because we have also different perspective. We have the BRI started 10 years ago. So we have finished results, for instance, where I'm thinking about still the railway in Ethiopia, in Kenya, for instance. We have unfinished product, but the aim is that when a product, when infrastructure construction is finished, it's that we will be able to start generate some revenue and some benefit. Looking at it more from a, let's say, more of economic perspective, when we invest, for instance, in a new business venture, the first period, it's not the period of where we are doing benefit, right? So it's kind of like first period we are trying to repay, if you want to say, what we have invested before going to this benefit sphere, if we may say. But when it comes to China, of course, we have there's the debts that have to be repaid. But I would say that there are benefits, maybe looking at it from more a people-to-people perspective. So of course, the aim of the BRI, the DSR, what's at the center is people. It's people, really. That's what's at the center. So for instance, when we have the railway in Kenya, Mombasa, it's making people's life easier. It's also maybe enhancing trade, regional trade as well. So we do have those benefits that are not necessarily the first thing that we see, but they are there. So I'm trying to kind of shorten the answer, I hope. Give you some.
Okay, so before I come to Benjamin to speak, I have this is more of a comment from Kwabena Mensah. I don't know whether you know him, because he said, Nancy, thanks for an engaging presentation and compliment on your lovely, harmful, inspired outfit. So I'm sure this person.
Thank you.
Yeah, so he said that the DSR is an excellent opportunity for win-win cooperation between Africa and China in the area of the physical infrastructure of the digital economy. However, my insight is that Africa's greater digital deficit is logical, that is the domains of development of data, civil registration, and vital status and content. I recommend strongly that DSR be expanded to cover Chinese public and private investment in partnership with Africa towards CRBS data acquisition and content generation. So that's just something that he wanted to share. So it's not a question, it's more like a contribution on this discussion. Benjamin, are you there? If you are there, please, you can unmute yourself, and then I'll give you the permission to you raise your hand. So I was assuming you want to speak. Benjamin Bediakun, are you still there? If you are there, then please, you have permission to speak. Yeah. So thank you very much, Kwabena, for that comment. So maybe I'm going to ask this last question from Samuel, asking how can this program, which is a DSR, unify the African mobile telephony with a single dialing code for the whole continent, as in other continents? You know, that's what the president is asking. Can DSR be leveraged, you know, to help Africans, you know, mobile, you know, technology space, especially helping us to get a single dialing code or something, just like it happens in other continents? Yeah.
A single dialing code.
Yes, a single. One
okay,
dial.
so where does it happen? I think all countries have their
yeah, single dialing, exactly. In Europe,
all countries have their dialing
their,
code. It's part of our identity. Sometimes we don't necessarily refer to Congo, but we will say 243. So it's a part of our identity.
Okay. So okay, so this one is from Michael. I think I will do this. Is it with the space frontier increasingly becoming accessible to operators, do you think China DSR will become obsolete in the near future as more and more internet firms join in the race for satellite launches, triggering a race to the bottom? I mean, so it's about the space, you know, and the space exploration technology and all these internet and all of that. I mean, would it get to a point where we see that China DSR, maybe it doesn't involve any space exploration, but if it doesn't, is it going to be obsolete in the near future? If so, then of course it might be thinking about something else as a continent as well. Yeah.
I would like to believe that it won't become obsolete since digital technologies, they are changing every day, transformation every day. We have something new. So I think that the digital Silk Road is changing as well. So there will always be opportunities in that sense. So I don't think that we will reach that obsolete level. On the contrary, I think we will have more opportunities.
Sure. Thank you very much, Nancy. I think that brings us to the end of today's webinar. It's been very insightful. I think we'll have to do this again because I feel there's more information that you have that you will still be able to share with the audiences in another time. So a big thank you to all of you for joining us. This has been brought to you by the Africa-China Center for Policy and Advisory. I am Paul Frimpong with the Africa-China Center for Policy and Advisory, and of course, my colleague is Nancy, Dr. Nancy Lohalo, who's a senior research fellow, and of course also a professor at ISAP Bombay. I think I got the name right or wrong. In Kinshasa, it's a French name, so I can't mention. I don't want to mention it and mess it up. So it's been a pleasure having you, Nancy, on this webinar. We so much appreciate you for this insight. And this session is recorded. We will have it prepared and shared on our YouTube and our social media, our website. So those of you who want to rewatch and of course understand more, you will get opportunity to do so. We will send it by email to you as well when it's already online. Until we come your way again, we say enjoy the rest of the weekend and have the best in everything that you're doing. Yeah. Okay.